All right, so let's talk a little bit about Adobe Illustrator. So I went to search bar, opened it here. You could also open it from the Creative Cloud app, which can be found by either searching here, and if you type in cloud, it should bring it up. It's got this colorful logo here. That's sort of like a hub that all the Adobe stuff works out of. Also, if you're not getting logged in properly, it's not really worth trying to go through Photoshop or Illustrator stuff. You want to go right to Creative Cloud Hub. There's a second way to get there, which is down this little arrow. So like Bluetooth, stuff like that, or ejecting a memory card, you'll do it from that arrow. But there's also a spot in there, I think. Oh, well, we used to have it there, maybe not now, but that's fine. Sometimes you'll see it in there, depending. But either way, sometimes you'll see it open down here too. If we go to Creative Cloud, we can make sure we're logged in and stuff. I have Illustrator open here, so I will make a new document. Since all of you are probably starting with a page like this. So we have some presets up here at the top. We have saved, mobile, web, print, etc. Anything that's printed, you want to probably do at 300 dpi, which is the resolution per inch. But in the case of this, we might be doing stuff that ends up at 4K, 1080p. It's kind of hard to predict. Now, the cool part about vector art, though, which is what Adobe Illustrator does, is it's described by math. Like, has everyone done a quadratic equation where you do like a line on a graph? Now, that line is a curve done with math, and all you're doing is changing the variable, and it is a smooth curve no matter what, right? It's perfectly analog, as opposed to digital, where it's stepped. That makes sense. The way vector art works is that instead of remembering the color and value of every single pixel, like a JPEG or something, it's just giving you an equation. You don't ever have to deal with the math yourself. It's just happening behind the scenes. It gives you an equation that describes a perfectly smooth curve. And we all know how small an equation can be. It's only a couple characters, right? So think about the file size. If you have a picture that is in, like, say, 300 dpi or dots per inch, then you have 300 bits of pixel information of both color and where it is in the XY scale, location, basically, for every single pixel, right? That's a lot of data. Whereas if I were to draw a heart, that is just two curves that can be done with an equation, which is a couple of characters, maybe a few bytes of data, right? Much smaller files. Now, the thing about vector, if I were to go through and make like a little design with this vector art, if it were the size of a stamp and I blow it up to the size of the Empire State Building, it would not be any bigger as far as a file, because all this changes the variable in the equation that describes a curve. It would just get bigger, right? So that's kind of a quick background on Vector. Illustrator is mainly vector stuff. Now, we do have to worry about pixels and resolution for a game, because obviously your final game, if it's like 4K or something, we need to think about that resolution when we're making characters and stuff, right? But if it's vector, we do not so much. As long as this isn't getting transferred to pixels at some point, vector is pretty much resolution independent. So with that in mind, I'm not going to worry too much right now about thinking in terms of resolution. What I will do in this case, I'll just click letter. Now you can watch or you can follow along too. It's sort of up to you. I'll just go over to the workspace really quickly here. So Illustrator up here, we have this little home button, which will bring you back to that home screen. Hold on. The problem I might have is this might go across two monitors. Nope. Okay, never mind. So this takes us back to this home screen here that you saw. I'm going to go back to new file. I'll do print. Over here, you can see a few things. You can name it here. And you could do the width and the height in pixels. You could go portrait or landscape. This, you can do points, pixels, inches, whatever you need. I'm going to choose pixels on this. And let's say I want a height that is 150 pixels. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to do 50 by 50 because I'm thinking about making a little tile that can be used for the character to walk on. So I want it to be square, right? 50 by 50. For this, the color mode we're not going to dwell on too much for now, but I think it's fun to leave it. We can convert that later. This is RGB color, which usually things that either take in or project light work in RGB. Like our monitors are RGB, camera sensors are RGB, things like that. CMYK tends to be things that absorb light, aka printing on paper, right? Ink. Ink works by what it takes away, whereas you could say RGB is additive, and that's what we call it in our photo class, for instance, because we've all seen I'm trying to think what you call it, like prism, where it takes all the rainbow colors and turns them into white, or works vice versa, right? Splits white light into colors. The more of all the colors you have, the closer it is to white. Whereas when you print stuff, the more of all the colors you have printed on a sheet, the closer it gets to black, right? Because it absorbs all the colors. So it's just two different systems here. For this, I would just click RGB. It might give you a little warning here. It's okay, it doesn't really matter at this point. So I'll hit create. Now this roster effects, if something were to get pixelated from an effect you put on it, this is resolution would be at. So 300 is good for anything you print when we're talking about pixelated stuff. So that's fine. Okay. So back to this here. All right, so I showed you the home screen. That gets you back to the main screen. File has all the stuff you'd expect. New, for making new files, open recent, closing, saving, save as, save a copy, version history if you want to go back a few versions in your file. You can do share for review, export. This one's going to be kind of important later because we will be exporting stuff to use in Unity. Now, quick note, do JPEGs support transparency? Does anyone know? So if I made a character, all characters, basically all pictures have to be square, right? Now, if I made a character, would he have a white background around him if I exported as the JPEG? He would. It would have to be square, right? So if I drew a character, he would have a white square around him. What common format could I use besides JPEG that supports transparency? Yes. PNG, exactly. PNG does support transparency. So with this whole exporting thing, if we had to export something for web, for instance, PNG works on web. It also works with Unity. So just keep that in mind. We will be exporting things at some point, most likely. So JPEGs aren't going to be our favorite choice here if we were to export this to a pixel-based thing. All right, we can separate documents. We can print, exit. Here in edit, we have the normal stuff you'd expect: undo, redo, cut, copy, paste in front, paste it back. Now, you might be used to using Command Shift V or Control Shift V or just Control V for pasting. It works a little differently in Photoshop. We either paste stuff in front of or behind other objects. So you're not going to see just the normal. Well, we do have Control V, it's just not used as much. We have paste in place, which puts something in the same place where you copied it from. Find and replace, edit colors. This is pretty handy if you want to recolor an entire artwork. Some other stuff here. Here's preferences and settings. There's a few things in there that are handy we'll talk about later. Object. We've got alignment, transforms, etc. I don't have an object selected, so most of this is grayed out, but if I did, we could transform it, arrange it, which means front to back. We could align it, or align several objects to each other, distribute it, group, ungroup, lock. We could expand. We'll talk about this stuff later. Rasterize it to pixels. There's a bunch of things in here. Then we have some things you can do on an object here. This stuff would be like taking a path and make it wider, or putting an outline around it that you could change, stuff like that. We'll talk about that later. Type. This is all text-based stuff. Selecting. This is for selecting one or several objects, or deselecting objects, or inverting your selection, which means selecting the opposite. Say we selected a letter and had a bunch of art behind it, we inverted it. Well, everything except the letter would then be selected. So this can be helpful. You can do some selections by same appearance, same fill and color, same stroke, and stroke will be the line that we'll see around our art later. So basically you can select like objects by some parameters that they have, or some attributes, I should say. So, like, let's say you have a bunch of shapes and only some of them have a certain width of line around the edge. You can easily select all of them just by that line width, just all the ones with the same width. So we'll come back to this later. We have effects here, which we're not going to use for this most likely. View, kind of same thing. We can zoom in, zoom out, fit artboard to window. Just remember, in Adobe stuff, if you hit Command 0 or Control 0 on PC, it's usually going to fit your artwork neatly inside the bounds of your window. Right, so you'll use that one a lot. But Control plus and minus also to zoom in or out. Window here, we can actually go through and bring out different palettes. And when I say palettes, what I mean is stuff like these over here. We have these little tab things that have different tool options and stuff in them. So we can find some of those. If like you deleted one or closed one by accident, you can come back here and get it. We can arrange these windows in certain ways, like having files next to each other vertically, left and right, stuff like that. We can also go to pre-made workspaces, which is the organization of all these panels. So we have some for painting, printing, tracing, etc. Now, if we mess one up by moving stuff around, we can always come back and reset it, and we can save our own. So that is where all these palettes would be in the organization of the page, basically. We have some other ones we can bring out here that you don't need all the time, different palettes and tool windows. And here, of course, is help, Illustrator help, tutorials, support, about, things like that, manage my account, stuff like that. Okay, to go over the tools quickly. Now, we're going to be working with objects. And so objects, the way we work with them, Illustrator, we can select the whole object or parts of it. What I mean by that is if I go here and I make a circle, Illustrator works with math, as I told you. So what it's really describing, there's an equation behind the scenes that describes the circle, the line on, just like a graph, right? And we'll place it with a fill color inside it if we want one. So if I use the black arrow to select it, it's going to move the whole object. If I pull on the corners, it's going to resize it. But if I hold shift while I'm resizing it, it's going to make it perfectly square if it's rectangle, or circular if it's a circle. So shift's really handy. It makes a lot of things even on the length and the width. If I let go of shift, it goes back to any way I drag it. Now, this, as I said, the black one moves the whole object. So let's see what the white one does. The white arrow, if I deselect this by clicking outside it, I'm working with parts of it here. Like I can click on one point and I can move it around. I can grab these handles here on these curves and drag them. These are called Bezier. It looks like Bezier, B-E-Z-I-E-R, but it's pronounced Bezier. These are called Bezier handles, and they describe a curve and how far it extends from a point. So you can see here that we have some control over this by dragging these handles and rotating it. We can move the point itself with the white arrow. Also, we have some other tools here where we can work with these individual handles. This one here is something that breaks that curve that follows from left to the right, so you can work with each curve on its own. And then this will also turn a curved line into a straight corner into a curve. So if I click this, that makes it a sharp corner. If I click and hold and drag it again with this tool, it becomes a rounded corner again. So we have a lot of control over these points and how they make shapes. So this is kind of the idea behind vector. It's a lot about points and lines. Now I have this stroke here, which is line rounded and the fill color. So I will see those represented. Here's the fill and here's the stroke. So if I double click this fill, it's going to bring out something where I can choose an overall color and a more specific color inside here. So choose your basic color here, and then in here you can get more specific on lighter to darker and the saturation, how vibrant it is. So you just move this around to where you want it, click OK. That's now my fill color. The second color behind it here that's outlined is going to be the stroke color around the edge. So I can double click that. Same deal here. I can choose an overall color and then the more specific one. If you don't want a fill color at all, or you don't want a stroke color, you can click this little guy here. Whenever you see this white square with a red line through it, that means none. So if I were to click on this, then hit none, that would give me just a blue outline with no fill. Or if I clicked on fill and hit none, that would give me just a green fill with no outline outside it. No visible outline, at least. So we have some options there. Okay, do you want to try this all yourselves? All right. So I showed a circle here. And just to zoom in a little bit on the tools, we have the black arrow I mentioned here that works with whole objects. The white arrow here that works with parts of objects. And notice this little white triangle in the lower right corner here. Anytime you see that, that means if you hold this down, there's going to be other tools inside here. So we can do a lasso selection if we want to freehand just part of something, like just a few dots out of the circle instead of all of them. We can set groups. This tool here is that thing I use to transform one point from being a curve to a sharp point. But generally, this is the pen tool. So the pen tool can make shapes like this, but you can do it kind of on your own, however you want them to be. So let me use the black arrow to select this object and delete it. Then I will either click the pen tool here or hit P on the keyboard for pen. Now, folks, this one's important, so make sure you're watching up here for this one, the pen tool. So the pen tool allows you to make your own shapes. And basically, if you click, it's going to make a single dot, and it will string lines between dots. But if you click and hold and drag, it's going to make a curved line. So I'm going to click once here. Notice it's showing me a preview of this line going out here. Wherever I want to put the next point, I just click, click, click. Now, as soon as I need a curved line, I click, hold, and drag. And I get this blue. Can everyone see that blue preview curve? Okay. So that's going to give me a curve. And the way Illustrator works, whenever you have a curve going, it likes to continue that curve. So notice I can't do a sharp point here. No matter where I go, it's going to curve outwards, right? Now, there is a way to deal with that, and that would be that tool. See how when I go over this here, it shows that little upside down V? That means it's going to convert that point if I click on it again. So instead of getting this curve, if I needed a sharp point, I could click on it a second time, and now I get a sharp point again off of the curve. So curve, curve, curve. And then when you get back to the point you started, you see that little circle under my pen tool there? Notice it goes away if I move off this. When you get back to the point where you started, that is showing you that if I click here, it's going to make a closed path. I've gone full circle, right? And I'm connecting the end point to the starting point. When we can in here, we generally try to make closed paths because they tend to perform better in Illustrator, right? They're easier to work with for the most part. There's a few occasions where we have some paths that aren't closed, but generally if you're making a shape, you'd want to have it closed. Now, if you wanted to make a line in here that didn't have a fill color, you can do that. I'll go ahead and I like to control click outside of the object to deselect it. Now, I will go in and let's say I want a line inside this. Now, the problem is this has a green fill and it blends in right now because there's green behind it. But if I move this object, see how it's actually got the green fill still? So this would be one case where I could click on this object with the black arrow, and then I could tell it fill and click none. That would make it so that this does not have a fill. So this tool is sort of the basis behind a lot of shapes, right? Or a lot of things we do in Illustrator. So I'll hit P for pen again. If I wanted to draw a face, for instance, I would click again, or click and hold if I want a curve. Notice it's going to follow this curve again. I'm going to click here to kind of change this from a curve. It should do it. Oh yeah, you click and hold to get a curve. Now in some cases like this, I kind of want my line to just end here. I'm going to go back, put somewhere else. So I'm going to hold down control and click just to deselect that. And then I can go here and start another line. I'm holding down spacebar to give me this temporary hand. So you can hold spacebar, get the hand, then you can click and hold to draw. And then when you let go of spacebar, it goes back to being whatever tool you were on. So that's a handy trick. Now here I'm going to do my F7 V click again to go back to a sharp curve. If you need to go back a few steps, just hold control and hit Z. That will undo, and you can undo multiple levels. So I'll go back there. Start here. Yeah. Yes. All right, so you can just do outlines with curves like this. And then you can think about the fill colors after that. Once again, I'm holding down spacebar. Now this is telling me I'm linking back to the original. All right, and then because this is all made with shapes, we can use this white arrow if we need to change any little part of this. So I could click on any of these points or lines and edit them at any point. I can pull on these control handles, move the points, curves, whatever we need to do. So you get a lot of editability with these, right? You can select groups of points, and you can even use the arrow keys to move them up or down as needed. I can click this with the black key and then try and give it a fill color. Okay, so we have a lot of power. Now this stuff you can basically layer up because it's objects.